I want to quickly talk about Deshaun Watson. And actually, to preface my talking about Deshaun Watson, I want to talk about why I haven't talked about Deshaun Watson. And it's really the fact that I don't see any reason to, or haven't seen any reason to before today. And it's not like something happened within the last 48 hours to make me go, yep, need to talk about Deshaun Watson today. Stuff is developing. Actually, it's the exact opposite. It's the fact that the Deshaun Watson talk is kind of slowing down a little bit, that now I feel comfortable in talking about potential trade destinations for Deshaun Watson. And that's the main thing. It's not the fact that, Deshaun Watson is without a doubt going to be traded, and as a reporter, as a sports personality, I need to talk about where not Carson Wentz. I need to talk about where Deshaun Watson is going. No, it's the fact that we don't even know that he's going anywhere yet, and the media, as we are prone to do, are taking a little bit of information and running with it and just playing out all the situations and scenarios in our head. It's what brings in the views. It's what's the clickbait. It's what everybody is interested to know. And that's the reason why I've stayed away from talking about it for so long, is because we know absolutely nothing. We know about as much as, our ailing grandmother knows about the Deshaun Watson situation. Only Deshaun Watson and Nick Caserio at this point know or have any slightest idea about what they're feeling. And now I'm not doubting sources. I'm not saying, well, the source is saying that Deshaun Watson is avoiding phone calls and Deshaun Watson is out of Houston. I'm not disputing those sources because they're more than likely true. But again, there are so many things that need to happen before Deshaun Watson officially says, okay, let me out. And the main thing that needs to happen is Houston needs a head coach, and Nick Caserio needs to meet with his personnel, his staff, to try and figure out what they're going to do about the situation. The big thing is that Deshaun Watson has a no-trade clause, so at the end of the day, it doesn't matter where the Texans want to send him. It doesn't matter where the media would like to see him go. What matters at the end of the day is where Deshaun Watson would feel comfortable going. And when you take that criteria for what it is, it eliminates a lot more teams than you would think. It eliminates silly stories like, well, maybe Deshaun Watson is the replacement for Drew Brees in New Orleans. No, he's not. They're $90 million in cap space. Oh, well, maybe he's going to be a New York Jet, and he's going to be the rebuild that the New York Jets need, and maybe he really likes Robert Saleh. It's like, well, you don't know that. And even though the Texans might want to trade with New York just because they have cap space, or they have the cap space to supplement the contract, they have the picks that you would want if you're the Houston Texans, maybe Deshaun Watson just doesn't want to go to New York. And it's like, well, he's liking pictures in jet green. It's like, oh, come on. Like, that's just Deshaun Watson stirring the pot, just sitting at home on his phone and laughing about everything. You don't take any of those seriously. You shouldn't, anyways. But now I'm just rambling at this point. I feel like I'm being forced to talk about where I think Deshaun Watson would go, just not to be left behind, even though I think a lot of it is a bunch of hogwash. But if I were Deshaun Watson, I have a list of teams here that I would be comfortable going to and being traded to. Because again, the important thing is that Deshaun Watson has a no-trade clause, meaning that if he does not like the destination, he can veto it and say, nope, you can't trade me. And it becomes a game of hardball in which the Texans might have a really good trade package offered to them for Deshaun Watson, and Deshaun Watson's like, I don't really want to go to Chicago, for an example. But to get into the list, the first team on the list is the Texans, and it's like, well, he's not going to be traded to the Texans. He's already a member of the Texans. And I put them on the list strictly because of the fact that there's like a 1% chance that Nick Caserio can sit down with Deshaun Watson and say, look, I understand I might not have been your first choice, but I am here to make the team better. I am not like the guy that completely came in last time and wrecked the franchise. The offensive coordinator now at University of Alabama, that guy. We don't say his name here. He's like Bloody Mary. Nick Caserio could walk in, sit down with Deshaun Watson and say, look, I am dead. I'm indebted. I'm not indebted. That's not the right word, but I am dedicated to making this work with you. What would you like to see? What direction would you like to go? Give Deshaun Watson the validation and the respect that he thinks he deserves. There's like a 5% chance that Nick Caserio can actually sit down with Deshaun Watson. They can choose a head coach together and go from there, and maybe Deshaun Watson decides to stay. That is that is a long shot, but still, I felt like it was an option worth mentioning, because the reality is that there might not be a team that offers a good enough trade package, and that team still might not be a team that Watson wants to play for, and he ends up being on the Houston Texans roster at the start of the next season. The next team I have on the list is Carolina, and we talked about Carolina yesterday. We talked about why Justin Fields would be on Wednesday. We talked about how Justin Fields would be a great quarterback for Carolina to draft because of who's already there. Teddy Bridgewater is a phenomenal game manager. He's a smart player. Not really the best quarterback. He's only average when it comes down to his production on the field. So, in my mind, I think Carolina is ready to move on from Teddy Bridgewater. An easy way to do that would be to trade for Deshaun Watson. Panthers have 8th pick in the draft, so you trade your first-round pick and Teddy Bridgewater to the Houston Texans for Deshaun Watson, plus a little extra thrown in there. The Houston Texans Carolina does have some decent cap space, and Watson's old QB coach now is in Carolina. His name is escaping me. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, which is going to haunt me, but still, Watson's old QB coach is now in Carolina. There's a connection there. Carolina has a good developing offense with Christian McCaffrey, Robbie Anderson. They have some talent there, and they do have a top 10 pick. That's got to be very attractive for Houston with this draft. And again, the trading away Bridgewater would essentially go 1-for-1 in terms of cap space, because I think the Carolina Panthers are actually over the cap at this point, but a lot of that is Bridgewater's massive contract. So trading that contract to Houston, it doesn't really benefit Houston, but it would make sense. It's about 1-for-1 in terms of trading Watson for Bridgewater when it comes to the money side of things. Next team, Miami Dolphins. We've talked about this already on the show as well. I've kind of changed my tune a little bit. Originally, I was like, "Oh no," but I like to. Don't do that to him. You know, he hasn't had enough time to grow, and I still feel that way. But the more and more I think about it, it's like you'd be insane not to pass up on Deshaun Watson. Like, this is a business. You need to make the trade if you can. The Dolphins have plenty of picks. 2 in the first round of this year's draft, I believe 2 in the first round of next year's draft as well. They've got the picks, they have the cap room, but the thing is that they do seem committed to Tua Tagovailoa, which is the thing that kind of puts Miami not necessarily out of the running. Now, it is worth mentioning, people didn't know that Miami was going to draft Tua in the draft. They thought, well, maybe they're going to take Herbert. There was a lot of smoke and mirrors with that. So, you know, it could be a similar thing going on where Miami is actually extremely interested in Deshaun Watson, but they're not saying, and they're saying otherwise to try and do a little smoke and mirrors and keep other teams off the board in terms of being able to trade for Watson. Next team I have, Chicago. Chicago would have to make room in the cap for Watson. They don't have a lot of picks. They picked 20th in the draft this year. But in terms of player personnel, Chicago has an extremely good defense, which playing with a defense that's as good as the Chicago Bears defense has got to be appealing to Watson, since the Houston Texans have not had a very good defense since Watson has been in Houston, so that would be very appealing. The Chicago Bears would need to get a wide receiver in the draft. They do have Anthony Miller, who's a pretty good wide receiver, but other than that, Chicago has drafted really poorly recently, especially at the wide receiver position. They would need to go get a wide receiver in the later rounds of the draft to try and help Deshaun Watson if he came there. Obviously, Trubisky is there. You send Trubisky to Houston, do a little 1-for-1 there as well. But if you're Chicago, I think you're trying to move on from Trubisky anyway. It makes sense. Watson would be a great quarterback for Chicago, especially with a strong defense. Could be really good, but Chicago is probably the team that would require the most work to be done after the fact if Watson was to be traded there. Next team, the San Francisco 49ers, and this is a team that has been thrown around a lot by analysts. And when I was talking earlier about, well, everybody wants to sit here, every single sports media member wants to take a look and say, wow, could you imagine Deshaun Watson with this team? And the 49ers is a team that's thrown around a lot. And actually, analysts are right on this one. I mean, the 49ers would be a great landing spot for Deshaun Watson. Good offensive talent, good offensive depth. Deebo Samuel at wide receiver is a great player, great person for Watson to throw to. They've got a strong defense. And, the thing that impressed me most about the 49ers last season is they were banged up, they were battered, but they were still winning games with second and third stringers. That organization knows what they're doing draft-wise. They have a lot of depth. They have a good footing beneath them. I feel like a lot of trade scenarios for me involving a quarterback that's on the hot seat that Houston would be okay with taking along with first-round draft pick. And again, Garoppolo and a first-round draft pick seems like a very good deal for the Texans to take in return for Deshaun Watson. Obviously, there's a little bit of incentive sprinkled in with that on the San Francisco side, but the 49ers is a team that makes a lot of sense. And if I'm Deshaun Watson, I'm taking a look at the 49ers and saying that is a team that I would want to go to. Like, just based on the franchise's history, just based on how good of a depth they are, how good they've been at drafting recently, and how well they treat their talent there. That would be probably the number one spot for me is probably the 49ers. And not because of, wow, that just look at the player personnel, but just taking a look at all the not the superlatives, but the variables at play with the front office, drafting, et cetera, it'd be a great place for Watson. Next on the list, Denver. And this is a name that you haven't really thrown around really all that much when it comes to Deshaun Watson. The Deshaun Watson sweepstakes. I feel like there should be a wheel of Watson somewhere around above my right-hand shoulder here. The only thing with Denver is that Elway seems to be really sold on Drew Lock, despite the fact that not anybody else is sold on Drew Lock as the quarterback of the Denver Broncos. Denver has a new general manager, so that might make them a sleeper to try and make a play for Watson, but Elway still likes Drew Lock. This was this was an option where I was like, maybe, but then I'm like, probably not, but still, there's enough of an interest there that piqued me enough to put them on the list here. And the last team on the list that I feel, and again, for those of you that are either skipping ahead or skipping through, this is the teams that if I were Deshaun Watson and I were asking to be traded, these are the teams that I would waive my no trade clause to be able to be traded to those teams. Last team is Pittsburgh Steelers. Now this is only plausible if Ben Roethlisberger retires this season. His retirement will free up the cap space necessary for the Steelers to go and get Watson. But great defense, star wide receivers. They just signed Dwayne Haskins, so that tells me that they're not exactly interested in Deshaun Watson at this point. And that also tells me that Ben Roethlisberger probably won't retire because Dwayne Haskins, if you're a Steelers fan, answer me honestly. Do you really think that that's Dwayne Haskins, or do you rather want Dwayne Haskins to be your starting quarterback? It doesn't make sense that, at least to me, that the Steelers would take a chance on Dwayne Haskins to make him their starting quarterback, especially after everything that they've seen in Washington. So that either means, hey, Roethlisberger isn't retiring, he's coming back for another year, or it means, hey, potentially they're going to make a play for Watson here. So that's the list of teams. Again, to recap, chance that he stays to the Texans, there is a small chance. Carolina, Miami, Chicago, 49ers, Denver, and the Steelers. So, if you were forcing me against a wall, putting a gun to my head saying, tell me the teams that Deshaun Watson would probably go to, that's my list. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching this segment from the Hard Headed Sports Podcast. You've heard what I've had to say, now I'm interested to hear what you think as well. If you enjoyed this highlight from the show and want to watch more highlights from the show as they come out after the show's completion, you should definitely subscribe to the YouTube channel, and if you're interested in listening to the entire show in its full-length entirety, you should follow the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Anchor. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you all very soon.